Let's bring in Donald Trump Jr., Executive Vice President of the Trump Organization, of course, the son of President Trump. He's got a beard now. Don Jr., tell us a little bit about what it was like with your dad before he went in, because it was just about 10 days ago that Nancy Pelosi uninvited him. So going in, was he going, this could be tough because there could be a lot of resistance in there?
No, listen, I mean, the bottom line is there's always going to be resistance. When you look at some of the things that the Democrats refused to stand for, the fact that my father got right to try legislation passed, so many things that, all-time low Hispanic unemployment, all-time low African-American unemployment, the fact that the State of the Union is strong. When you see the Democrats not standing for that, I mean, those are things we can all agree on. Those are things that any American should be proud of. And so, I think he always knows they're going to put up some sort of fake resistance for political purposes. But the reality is he's a game time player. He went in there. He was prepared. He was ready. And he delivered. I mean, he made me not only proud, incredibly proud as a son, but also as an American. And we need to see more of that these days.
Don, I thought it was smart of him to start with the unity issues, what we have in common, how victory is not winning for our party, winning is for our country. It had nothing to do with Democrats, Republicans. Then he goes into the economic numbers, which no one can disagree with, and is proud of him for that. Then he talked about energy, how we're now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas. Then criminal justice, which was a bipartisan issue. And then he talked about the wall and immigration. Listen to this.
This is a moral issue. The lawless state of our southern border is a threat to the safety, security, and financial well-being of all America. Wealthy politicians and donors push for open borders while living their lives behind walls and gates and guards. Tolerance for illegal immigration is not compassionate. It is actually very cruel. We will always support the brave men and women of law enforcement. And I pledge to you tonight that I will never abolish our heroes from ICE. Thank you. Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration and putting the ruthless coyotes, cartels, drug dealers, and human traffickers out of business.
So that's front and center. We got a deadline on that coming up, Don Jr. The president was effective there, but half the room, you could tell me what you saw, half the room sat there still, the other half stood and cheered.
Well, the reality is it's just politics. I mean, my father even said it in the speech. Most of the people in that room, even the Democrats, had voted for the wall and other border security measures. Now that Donald Trump is in there, now that you have a president that's finally getting things done, not just talking about it, but actually delivering on his campaign promises, actually making things happen, actually moving America forward and gaining our respect again in the world, now they're against it, because they don't want to give him a perceived political win to deliver yet another campaign promise. So, I don't think anyone in America doesn't believe that this is all political. I don't think anyone in America somehow doesn't believe that walls work. Just look at the statistics of El Paso and Juarez. Two border towns, one in Mexico, one in the United States. The murder rate in Juarez is through the roof. The only thing that separates them is a wall that was recently installed. El Paso used to have a similar murder rate. These things work. It's common sense. So I think Americans are on to the idea that this is political. And when you talk about that, even when you talk to my father in person, not just the stories about human trafficking, but when you hear some of the stories that he's heard from the ICE agents that he's met on the border, talking about parents giving their young children birth control because they know they're going to be raped on the way up on this terrible journey. I mean, this is a humanitarian crisis if there's ever been one. And for Democrats to play that game is truly sad.
Well, I think that clearly when you look at, and up on the big screen, we've got that CBS News poll that Brian alluded to, 76% of the viewers who watched your father's speech last night approved of the speech, and a majority of them approve of his take on immigration. Stacey Abrams was selected to give the Democratic response. She ran for governor down in the great state of Georgia. She did talk a bit about voter suppression, but she also talked about immigration in the official response. Listen to this, Don Jr.
Compassionate treatment at the border is not the same as open borders. President Reagan understood this. President Obama understood this. Americans understand this. And Democrats stand ready to effectively secure our ports and borders. But we must all embrace that from agriculture to healthcare to entrepreneurship, America is made stronger by the presence of immigrants, not walls.
And when she talks about Ronald Reagan understood that there was a problem with illegal immigration in the country, and he tried to go the congressional route, and he got a deal, but then ultimately, in the long run, that was a bad deal for Reagan.
Yeah. Well, I think more importantly, my father even said it. He's all for immigration, but a merit-based system whereby people come into this country who are going to contribute, who can, create jobs and do all of the things. My mom is an immigrant. My father's mom is an immigrant. We've lived an incredible immigrant story and a success story in this country. We understand all of the merits of those things. But that said, we can't just haphazardly let everyone come in, let everyone come into a system that they're likely never to pay into. We're going to destroy our school systems, which are already so overburdened. Our public school systems, are at a breaking point, and they just want to flood it with other people. Our health care system, the same thing. We want to be compassionate. We want to be able to help everyone. But we have to help our own people first. Once we solve all of those problems, then we can deal with the rest of the world. But, the Democrats go about this as though we don't have our own problems to deal with within this country.
Yeah.
So we are all for immigration, but we want to bring in people who really are going to contribute, people who are here on a merit-based system. And that's just common sense, guys. That's any other country in the world's immigration policies. That's what Canada does. It's amazing that we're having these arguments today. The Democrats are so out of touch, and, their motives are not pure. Anyone
and we do need labor,
that.
And work visas are the ticket, and we should agree on that. The president's quote was, "I want people to come in the largest numbers ever, just legally. This includes our obligation to the millions of immigrants living here. And when illegal immigrants come, they have to be put into school. No questions asked. No one's asked about their status. It's against the law to do so. And guess where they put them? They don't put them into the rich areas. They put them into the working class areas where the teachers are already overtaxed, the classes are already too large, and they don't, for the most part, speak English. So it hurts everybody from A to Z.
100%. I mean, the people that are affected most by these policies of open borders are young African Americans, young Hispanic Americans in those communities. And, that's a shame. And we shouldn't allow that to happen, because that's going to perpetuate so many of the cycles of poverty that really affect those constituencies and those demographics. That doesn't affect me as much. I'm blessed to be able to send my kids to private schools. We want to make sure that we take care of all Americans. My father's been fighting so hard for that. The first way to do that is with the incredible economy. There is not a single economic metric where we are not better off today than we were 2 very short years ago under President Obama. That's not even arguable at this point. All of that benefits everyone in this country. All of that allows this to continue. And the Democrats, their concept, let's shut it all down. Let's tax everyone 70%. What could possibly go wrong? They use Venezuela as their model for socialism. So I love that my father said that America will never be a socialist country, because that's the other side's platform right now. It doesn't take much. Listen to any of the sound bites. Listen to any of the people that
in fact,
their allies in the mainstream media are putting forward as real contenders. Listen to the things and just watch their body language last night on things that all Americans should agree on. They don't even stand or applaud.
We were watching
scary.
Bernie Sanders when your dad talked about being a socialist country, when he talked about Venezuela and reminding us what socialism really looks like. Listen to this soundbite, and then we'll get your reaction.
We are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country. We are born free, and we will stay free. We renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
You would think that everybody in that hall would have stood up and cheered. Not the case. There's Bernie's reaction to a similar comment.
Well, and by the way, look at the rest of the Democrats. I mean, Nancy Pelosi didn't even stand for this thing. I mean, it's no secret that that is their future, right? The Democratic Party, with their policies, does not exist if the populace is not dependent on big government. It's that simple, guys. This is not rocket science. They need Americans to be dependent on them. They need Americans to have to look to government for everything. That is what they're pushing. That is what they want. And that is why they can't fathom the notion of capitalism being the greatest system ever established.
And it's just funny to see
for
on
this
the
country.
left.
It put people on the moon. Buzz Aldrin was there last night. Those World War II vets were there last night. That incredible Holocaust survivor and that amazing story. And by the way, that happy birthday moment was spectacular. I mean, it was,
Americans are
I don't get misty-eyed too often, and that was getting pretty close. This is the greatest country in the world. The things that it has done and the things that it has accomplished and the things we have yet to accomplish are incredible. Those kind of systems would shut all of that down. Just look at anywhere else they've been implemented.
Hey, Don, the other thing is, and no one saw this coming, as people started defining what this new abortion law is in New York and 6 other states, and of course the most flagrant is Virginia, where this governor's under fire. You talk about fourth or final term abortion. The president went right at it. Listen.
Defend the dignity of every person. I am asking Congress to pass legislation to prohibit the late-term abortion of children who can feel pain in the mother's womb.
Yeah, just that image of so many people not reacting is stunning.
Especially these
it's
women.
Great. Guys, I mean, this is when he's talking about post-term abortion. How about anywhere else in the world, anywhere else in this country 2 weeks ago, that would have been considered murder. Okay? You had the governor of Virginia this week talking about, well, the baby is born, but if you maybe change your mind right after that.
We'll have a talk about it.
I mean, that is scary stuff, guys. This is not, I understand the conflict on the abortion issue, but after the baby is born, if we're having that conversation today and we're not, just saying outright, this is ridiculous, there's truly something wrong with our moral compass. And when I watch those Democrats standing there saying that, oh, it's terrible that you can't let someone kill a baby that is in the process of being born and labor or shortly thereafter,
their birthday.
Something's very wrong, guys.
Yeah, they're going to be forced to answer that. Real quick, Don, how are you and the organization handling which is supposed to be an avalanche of investigations and inquiries? How is that affecting you guys?
Listen, the reality is they've tried whatever they can to make our lives miserable that way. They've been doing it to me for 2 years on other issues. The reality is there's nothing there. We function. We're an incredible business. We do that. But, we can focus on our existing assets. They're trying to make it very difficult for us to grow. They're trying to do anything they can to smear this president. And again, they've gone and executed the greatest witch hunt in probably the American history, certainly going after a president. In 2 years, they've come up with exactly nothing. You've seen every soundbite that many of the other networks have been talking about, especially as it relates to me. If Don Jr. called his father, because they asked me in Congress, 2 years ago, you got a call on some random day for 2.5 minutes from a block number. Who was it? I say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember. Who called you? I don't know who called me yesterday. And, oh, my God, it must be this, it must be that. Guess what? Well, then, apparently they found out it's not, because I literally didn't know. They find out it's not, and that narrative dies.
They found
Every
out
week, another narrative dies.
They found out that it was not your father you had spoken to, and that changes the story. But I didn't see a lot of follow-up on that.
Well, there's none. They've been able to milk that soundbite for 2 years because no one knew it. I guess apparently Senate Intel must have subpoenaed the phone company records, found out I was talking to two friends who happen to have blocked numbers. So another narrative dies. Of course, there's no cover like, hey, maybe the big thing that we've been hanging our hat on for 2 years, maybe that one's over. But that's happened time and time again. The same thing happened with the WikiLeaks dump. The same thing happened with this. I think it's time that Americans get real answers for this rather than allowing the leftists who are running this operation to keep perpetuating these falsehoods about my father, about my family, because they're doing this country a major disservice.
Well, it does sound from yesterday, Chuck Grassley said he thought it might wrap up shortly, but then he kind of walked it back, so who knows?
I've been hearing it for 2 years.
I know.
Guys.
Don Jr., thank you very much for joining us on this busy Wednesday morning.
Thank you, guys.
All right.